Hello, I'm the Theorizer. Let us do this. No stalling, no confusion, pure organization. You'll know everything if you simply watch the first half of this analysis. I had to split the theory in 2 videos because it became way too complex to cram into one, so I'll link part 1 in the box in the top right corner of the screen now. Get it? Got it? Good. So this requires lots of infographics and organizable animations. We have Emma Linguini Jean, Mrs. Linguini Sherman, and Renata Linguini Gusteau, the red-headed female Linguini triplets spread across the world map, reaching France, Australia, and all across America, spanning Finding Nemo, Ratatouille, Up, Inside Out, and Toy Story, all contained to a single universal prong of the greater Pixar multiverse. In this universe, animals are the focus, their intelligence and interrelations with humanity. More could tie in, but later, because for now, we have a small list of questions required to solve, allowing us to evidentially flatten out the logic before we make the tree. First, we solve the most key of all key questions. Did Geri Jean marry Emma Linguini? Geri or Geri, I have no idea how to pronounce that. I'll just rotate back and forth throughout the video. Is a man from Pixar's short film Geri's Game. The short film involves him, an old man, playing chess in a park. He walks to the other side of the board and pretends to be a snarky opponent playing chess against his cleverly meek self with glasses. That's all. And he's one of the only main character old people in the Pixar universe. It seems rather obvious at first that he could be a potential candidate for any man Emma Jean remarried, but don't let the short film convince you of something's canonicity. Instead, look no further than in Toy Story 2, where we see him yet again. He is a toy fixer, a cleaner, and he fixes up Woody for the collector. Lo and behold, amongst his tools we see a chess piece, referencing the short film. It's the exact same man, aside from a minor change in glasses. And, unfortunately, the big one, eye color. I do believe Pixar has done this to throw us off the scent, despite everything else being identical, including the chess piece. The hair is slightly different too, but Pixar chose to change the eye color, so what evidence trumps the other? A slight change in eye color? Or a full-blown chess piece as reference? I don't know, maybe they're twins. Maybe Geri's Game is about him pretending to be his twin who died and he cannot cope. Okay, hold on. That's left field and nuts. No, I think that, if anything, it's the toy cleaner who's more tied into all of this. So let's just call this guy Geri or Geri or whatever, the updated model. This guy in Toy Story 2 who has more story. We know he cleans toys, clearly does play chess, but has very distinct, genetically characteristic, bright blue eyes, like many other characters in my tree here. It's the prime consistency. It's almost like Pixar intentionally gave him blue eyes to fit him in here. It truly is peculiar. It's like they're doing it to benefit this lore, not debunk it. Now that we've got a basis for our brainstormed tree, we have to prove it. Most of this is exclusively based on patterns like timing, locations, genetics, and last names, and we have to confirm all of those promptly. First, we'll do the genetics. You can see first off that Linguini has a huge nose like Geri, but primarily, Pixar tends to factor in hair color and eye color when they want to denote a genetic consistency, as we've seen. So let's check. We already know that the individual family trees of the Fredericksons, the Shermans, and the Gusteau family are accurate, but here's the grand family tree I'm proposing. Since I've had a whole week to mull it over, I've realized that timing is not completely in favor of this idea of the Linguini triplets, which means Emma Jean is more likely to be of a higher generation like Geri, Carl, and Ellie. The connection points we have added involve that of Mrs. Sherman and Renata Linguini, which means in order to prove much of anything, we need to tie them to Geri's final model form. So we know Darla has green eyes and Linguini has brown eyes. Since Gusteau has greenish blue eyes, that means Renata must have brown eyes. Darla has greenish blue eyes, and her uncle, and likely her father, have blue eyes. This means her mother must have a slightly more dominant trait like green or brown. None of this is consistent with Geri's new model, which has blue eyes. It is, however, indicative of Emma Jean having dark eyes, which is interesting because if you remember the one single genetic abnormality of the original family tree, it was that Jill Anderson has brown eyes. Given Riley's blue eyes and blonde hair, we stated that it must be a fact that she had a previous ancestor with blue eyes, since her father is also brown all the way. You might say that that's looking more and more like Emma Jean, but the only way for Renata and Mrs. Sherman to possibly have the eyes they do is if Emma has brown eyes and red hair. So if Geri has blue eyes now and Emma must have dark eyes, then Riley's blue eyes almost certainly come from Carl Fredricksen. It is solved. So the three mystery women, they all have red hair and brown or green eyes. They're probably freckled too if Darla Sherman and Alfredo Linguini are of any indication. The blue-eyed consistency on the Carl side of Emma's family tree is restricted to there, and the red hair deviated onto this side. Emma Jean, this woman who has been a mystery for ages now, is none other than the matriarch of Pixar. Now, genetically it makes sense, but we need to circumvent another obstacle: surnames. Emma Jean has 4 daughters in this theoretical model I'm brainstorming upon right now, and all of them have since taken the last names of their husbands, all except Renata, who we know carries the surname Linguini. This is inconsistent with Emma, whose last name is presumably Jean after marrying Geri. If the postcard of Emma Jean was sent to Carl and Ellie prior to her remarriage, then her maiden name could be Jean, and Geri's last name Linguini, finally, once and for all solving where Renata got her surname from. Renata is not commonly a French name, but it is quite European, so where on earth did the Red Girls grow up? And thus, we move on to locations. The Tri-County area currently contains the Davis branch, San Francisco contains the Anderson branch, Carl lives in his hijacked Zeppelin, what's left of the Gusteau branch is in France, and the Shermans are spread from Australia to, yes, California. Just like the Davises and Andersons. Emma and Geri are wishing you were here, meaning they're vacationing, presumably, but this is all during the years 2000 to 2015. Their movements are dynamic as ever. Initially, though, these 4 core people likely all originated from the central US. Carl and Ellie stayed, while Emma eventually spread her wings and sought out Geri. Carl's kids grew up in the Midwest-ish, and for reasons likely pertaining to Andy's father, Jennifer moved to California. Jillian and her family stayed in the Midwest, but eventually, yes, also ended up in California, San Francisco. Emma and Geri seemed to be quite widespread indeed. Their 2 daughters were probably born in America, but clearly they all just travel lots. Adventure is out there, apparently, and Emma Jean seems to agree with the Fredricksens' sentiments, constantly wishing her extended family were there with her on her trips with Geri Linguini. Renata travels all over the map and lands herself in France for a time, while the other one lands herself in Australia and weds herself to a famous family in many sectors. So yes, the locations now too are sensible. Finally, we have to involve the biggest blockade: timing. Oh dear, do I need to overlay all of my timelines, or should I just start fresh? So the top tier here is the early silent generation. Geri Linguini, Emma Jean, Elizabeth and Carl Fredricksen, amongst others of less linkable importance, like the Sherman doctors, Mabel Gusteau, etc. The baby boomers and Gen X pretty much encapsulate the parents of this family tree. The Shermans and Gusteaus are on the earlier side, while the Davises and Andersons are on the latter half, like the Red Twins. I mean, Emma could always be really old, but it's most likely that she had Carl's kids first. The kids, on the other hand, are all millennials and Gen Z. Linguini is quite on the old side, though. So we've done it. We've finally done it. We've solved all of the logical blockades and evened this out to actually make sense. All but one massive problem. We can't get into the further proof until we fix the glaring error. That is, Riley having modern technology, because if Finding Nemo takes place in 1995 to 2003 like I've theorized, and teenage Riley is seen in Finding Dory, then how on earth can Riley have such advanced computer technology and her dad have a modern cell phone? The picture of elder Ellie can be seen in Riley's house as she's a toddler, meaning the years still match, so what we need to do is compare the years they all take place and the kids' ages, specific specs, a sample from each branch. Andy was born in 1987, Riley was born in 2003, Darla was born in 1995, Linguini was born around 1980-ish. We see Riley in the Marine Life Institute during Finding Dory, which takes place in 2004. Riley is not 1 year old, so clearly she wasn't born in 2003. This is not a me inconsistency, this is a Pixar inconsistency. You know, unless this world just has technology moving faster than your average world. I mean, just look at BNL, the technologically advanced supercorporation of AI. Pixar's backed themselves into a corner with this one, but explained it via advancing technology and left no real date in the movie. Basically, these all take place in the 2000s, a time when laptops that look like this were still commonplace. It's more of a time range, but BNL and laptop designs are consistent. The other 3 films are consistent as well, such as how Jill reads about Colette in a magazine after she and Linguini open their new restaurant. But if that's the case, then Ratatouille has to take place in the earlier 2000s as well. But beyond that, now minor point of intrigue, things are sensible. But any additional patterns? Proof? Well, let's look at the wedding first. Come to think of it, I don't think Geri would have been here even as a young man, but Emma just has so many options. She has red hair, but it could have been slightly darkened like Ellie's, or, you know what? As uncanny and flabbergasting as it is, the only real person who fits Emma Jean's description by personality, by genetics, perfect to a T, is Ellie. The eye color, the hair color, especially as it darkens, and only the children of this tree have very orange hair. The age similarities. There are many candidates at the wedding, but Ellie, of all people, is the one I'd accuse of looking and acting the most similar to our tentative description of Emma Jean, which means, oh no, Carl? Carl? Carl knew Emma through Ellie. Why? Could they be related? Could they be sisters? The maiden name of Elizabeth has henceforth been unknown, but Jean could work. Oh my. Let's observe the wedding again. I'm fairly certain we see Ellie's parents in the front row of her wedding, but Carl's side is a bit different. I'm not so sure his mother is alive at the time of his marriage, but few perfectly fit for Emma. Ellie's family, though, the genetics would be on point. It would make sense. Emma's not some random mystery matriarch, but a sisterly divorcee. Her marriage to Carl was quite young, like age 18 or 19 based on the timeline, and they had Jen and Jill quite young, which would explain why they simply weren't ready to take all of it on. They raised them alongside 2 other adults by splitting up and remarrying to old flames. When Carl is actually ready, he remarries at 25 and they try for kids in their early 30s or so. Emma, on the other hand, hops right into having Renata and, I guess we can call the other woman, Missy, short for Mrs. Sherman. So Jen and Jill are born in the 50s, and given Andy's graduation, Toy Story 3 does not take place in 2010 during its release, but rather like 2003 to 2005. Shocker, that's also when Finding Nemo takes place, which means Toy Story 3, Finding Dory, and Inside Out all take place within a time bracket that does not coincide with their release date. Pixar seems to ignore technological years in the case of Inside Out and Toy Story, only further supporting a technically superior universe due to BNL. Wow. Renata and Missy were born in the late 50s or early 60s, and Renata had Linguini rather early too, mistakenly. So, at this wedding, could the 4 girls be seen? Yes, Jill and Jen Fredrickson could easily be anywhere in this crowd. God knows there are plenty of kids that fit their genetic description perfectionistically. But it would seem as though we're still not done. What on earth is it with Pixar and making me do multi-video theories? Why is there so much? These are not the kinds of questions any normal person would attempt to solve, nor are they even remotely easy. I am the god of navigating around plot holes. Holy cow, this is ludicrous. So in part 1, we recapped and established everything I've done before proposing the evidence and ideas required to theorize. In part 2, we've theorized. We've solved everything like crazy. But aside from the very clean tree, the timeline is disorganized, and there are 3 final questions. What better reason could Andy have kept this letter? What is Geri's link to being a toy cleaner and his step-grandson having the Woody doll? And finally, what happens next? Where are they now? Who's dead? What does this timeline look like? please do stay tuned. I've never gone so five-prongedly deep before. Click the subscribe button below, like, and comment your theories. It will motivate me to finish this faster. There's just so much, and I couldn't do it all in a short time span, but in 1 week, I will be finishing everything, once and for all, the final Imogene universe theory, because to my knowledge, no other Pixar film belongs here in this universe. Then we can finally move on to the other universes in Pixar. To finally, once and for all, answer the true question to the most believable solution to an interfilm connection, a multiverse theory. A multi-timeline true Pixar theory designed to interlock with any possible future Pixar films seamlessly, logically optimal, and incredibly difficult. Click the bell if you want to be notified of when we finally wrap up this, 12 theory-long escapade, because until next week, I'm the Theorizer.